Oh, do you have my phone stand?
No.
I had it sitting right here.
Oh, I guess I grabbed it, but I didn't use it. You can go live on TikTok too.
Yeah, I figured I might as well.
Put your title on TikTok as something like also live on YouTube.
Okay. What was that? Oh, it's all letting me know that I'm live. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Nobody's here yet, so that's fine.
I will be in a second.
I'm going to try to make this a little bit. I'm going to put a little subheading saying answering questions about the brain. Be Q&A about the brain.
Or you could ask me about the brain.
Okay. I think that looks good. Mm-hmm. Oh, there it is. Nobody's here yet. Oh, just Larry. Hi, what's up? It's good to see you. I'm just working on a quick thing for TikTok real quick. So if it takes me a second to get to you, I'm sorry. Just give me 1 minute. But please feel free to ask any questions you might have or any comments. What was I doing? Oh, yeah. There we go. Okay. Back to that. Oh, thanks. Yeah, we're actually just getting started. Do you have any ideas for a topic you want to discuss? Thanks for joining us, by the way.
Seems a little better.
Yeah. How's the sound quality? Let me know. I'm using a new microphone. Hey, oh, is it under effects? How do I do that one thing? Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay. Is that how it goes? Okay, there we go. Bam. Yeah, that looks right. It's a little weird. Let's see if I can. Sounds good? Okay, good. Thank you. That's not right. There we go. No, I'm going live right now. Okay, there we are. We gotta put this up over here. Yeah, there we go.
Should tell everybody about your new setup.
Yeah.
Dedicated spot.
I got my new setup. As you can see over here, you can't quite see, like just right over here, I got my Gengar. I'll have to grab it. It's keeping me company. And Eeyore is always falling. I got a new desk, new microphone, got my camera set up, so that's all good. Got kind of set up. It's nice to have stuff ready. I'm going to try to get more into this YouTube thing. Yeah, hello, welcome. Hi, how are you? So this is my second Friday Night Live in a row. And for those who were here last week, we had a good time just talking about whatever. And that's what we're going to do this week. Talk about whatever. If you have questions about the brain, I'll answer whatever I can. If I don't know the answer, we'll look it up together. Maybe we can find something. Or if you just want to BS about nothing, we can do that too. Mainly just here to interact with people. So feel free to chime in wherever you got, whenever you like. Yeah, and I am on both YouTube, Jack of all trades, I have it up there, and then also on TikTok. I'll be answering questions too. 1,000 subs here? Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, I don't want to do it here actually on Jack of all trades. I want to do it on my Neural Jack. Which, if you want to, feel free to subscribe to Neural Jack. It's NEURALJAC. And it's got like a little picture of a brain, looks like a neon sign. I just kind of whipped it up. But yeah, I am doing more neuroscience content over there, and I would really like to boost that channel. I've got 40 subscribers here now, which is a lot actually, considering I just opened this channel up a couple weeks ago. So that's cool. Go live on Neural Jack. Oh, maybe I should. But I'm already here. Maybe I'll do the third Friday Night Live on Neural Jack. But I do want to get that channel to 1,000 people because I want to monetize, but mainly so that I can kind of spend more time doing more neuroscience videos. I want to teach people about the brain and the nervous system and how they work. So yeah, got another YouTube channel. It's called Neural Jack. It's there in the comments. And I'll even type it here. Why not? But the purpose of it is to teach people about the brain and the nervous system. I do have one video up. I do plan to put more up soon. And it's association with procrastination. I think you're asking, like, why do we procrastinate, right? And there are a lot of different reasons why we do. Let me think for a second. So the first thing that comes to mind is the cost-benefit analysis. People will definitely procrastinate more if they don't feel motivated. If they don't feel like they're going to get the reward that they're looking for. People tend to procrastinate in tasks that they don't find enjoyable, right? Or tasks that they find too hard, or tasks that they find too easy, right? If it's too easy, it's not fun. So why do it? I might as well wait till the last second to do it. If it's too hard, I already feel like I can't do it. Why waste the energy to do it, right? So you have to find that like sweet spot in the middle where you're going, oh, What's up, Joe? Where you're going, oh, I feel like this is something that will be a bit of a challenge, but something that I can tackle and I will feel good for having done that. And so you can get a different kind of reward out of it. One, you could actually get a reward like money, right? You might get recognition, right? Um, Anything like that, those kind of motivators, praise, things like that. But also, it could just be like a personal growth kind of thing. Like you're motivated to just sub to Neural Jack. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think you're my 10th subscriber. So high five. Whack. Um, and even some that are desirable. Oh, sorry. Let me hold on. People with ADHD struggle with reward center stuff much more, which makes it really hard to initiate tasks that are undesirable and even some that are desirable. Yeah, totally. Reward circuitry is super important, right? We need. So, this is the weird thing. We always think of reward as like happy, right? Like, oh, it makes me feel good. It's rewarding. It feels good, right? But that's not exactly how reward works. And that's a new thing that we've come to find within the last couple of years. So, before we thought, oh, if something's rewarding, then it must feel really good. And so you just keep doing it because it feels good. But in reality, it's you can think of the dopamine circuit not so much as reward as it is about habit formation, which can be really powerful, especially if I don't know, it can be powerful for a lot of different reasons. But one main one that I think of often is with people who suffer from drug addictions. Um, but with people who have ADHD, there is a lot of literature to suggest that there's something going on with their dopamine circuits, dopaminergic neurons. Um, and if you know anything about dopamine or dopaminergic neurons, they go all throughout the whole brain, right? But they all stem from the spinal cord. Okay, so like they sit kind of in the midbrain, kind of where the spinal cord. Oh, I have my brain actually. Hang on. We'll just crack this guy in half, huh? And or maybe it's a girl. I don't know. Maybe it's a they. But you can see this kind of like gray spot right here. I'll show you right here. I don't know how well you can see it. There's this sort of gray spot where your dopaminergic neurons kind of originate, and they send dopamine out through the brain, and you can kind of see this blood vessel, right? Don't pay attention so much to the blood vessel, but the path does go a lot like this, the way this blood vessel is going, where the dopamine goes up and then out into the cortex, up and out into the cortex, up and out into the cortex, right? Like that. And then there's also a really important circuit right here that's going between the substantia nigra and the nucleus accumbens, right? And that is all thought to be heavily impacted by drug use, and very important for the process of forming an addiction. But people with ADHD are not able to produce it. Either they're not producing enough dopamine, or they're producing dopamine, but they're not able to receive it. And part of the importance of that structure, the way that the dopamine goes through the brain, is to hook up to your motor ability, right? To your movement, which is obvious almost when you really think about it, because you really want your motor activity tied to your reward, right? So, like I said before, reward is sort of thought of differently now. It's not so much, oh, thanks for the roses. It's not so much, oh, this makes me feel good. It's more, this is making something better, or it's making something better, right? So either, you know, I how do I say this? So food can be rewarding, right? If I'm hungry, then getting rid of that hunger rewards me, right? So in this case, I'm not adding something good, I'm taking away something that's bad. Similarly, if I run away from a predator and I get out of its grasp, that's a rewarding thing, right? If I solve a puzzle and it allows me to get something that I need, that will be rewarding. Um, Drugs, most psychoactive chemicals work off this circuitry, which is what makes them habit forming. right? Uh, but yeah, so people with ADHD have a really hard time with this circuitry, and therefore they have a really hard time building habits. Which is why you'll often see people with ADHD, they kind of like run around doing a lot but getting nothing done, and it's because they're not really, they don't have like a, oftentimes people with ADHD have a hard time establishing routine, which can be really good for someone whose brain is like that. And that's kind of a remedy for a lot of people who have dopamine issues, not just ADHD. Hi, Alana. Um, what are your thoughts on depression? Is it curable, temporary, a defect? That depends on what is causing the depression, right? Um, Sometimes it's temporary. Sometimes people have seasonal depression, right? In that case, it's like, what are you going to do about it? Okay, maybe get this person some sunlight. I don't know, get them like a little, what do you call those? Those light therapies or whatever. There's like a million devices out there. They might have to take a little bit of extra time to take care of themselves, right? Do something nice for themselves, have some ice cream or something. But for the most part, they're going to get over it. And usually, people who have seasonal depression know that about themselves, and they can usually gauge with some degree of accuracy about how long it's going to be before it goes away. So usually, if you know the cycle of yourself, it's not as big of a deal. Not to say that it isn't a big deal. It does suck. I suffer from seasonal depression. So does my wife. It really does suck. It's not fun. But if you can have depression for other reasons, right? You can have chemical imbalances. Those are a little harder to fix because then you need to try medications and therapies. Therapy is always best. Always do therapy. If you need to, do some medication along the way and then hopefully wean off the medication and up the therapy and then eventually get off everything once you're healed. So, yes, it is curable in most cases. In most cases. There are instances where people will, suffer from a trauma that is a bit too severe to like really get out of. Oftentimes, this is physical trauma with like damage to the brain. Sometimes this can be emotional or mental trauma that also can lead to damage to the brain. And there's different things that can happen. There's also drug induced things that can happen. For instance, working off the dopamine and reward stuff. When you do drugs that are typically recreational, they're not good for you, right? You're working off these dopamine circuits, and so you're throwing a bunch of dopamine out into the synapse, and serotonin, dopamine and serotonin out into the synapse. Really rewarding, makes me feel really good, right? But the problem is that you're dumping so much serotonin out into the synapse that your neurons are having a hard time keeping up with it, like pumping it out. And then your other neurons are going, oh, we're getting way too much. We need to stop making receptors for this. So not only are you going to not be pumping out as much of these chemicals naturally, but because you're already taking a bunch in unnaturally, your body stops making it. It's like, I don't need it because there's too much. I'm going to stop making it. And then I have too many receptors for this and I'm getting too much of it. I'm going to stop making receptors. So now, your brain no longer makes the thing. And even if it's there, your brain no longer wants to accept the thing. So then once you stop putting that drug into your system, it takes a really long time and potentially could be permanent for you not to be able to get enough serotonin. You're going to be in a really bad mood. Not like an angry mood. You're going to be depressed all the time. And without the ability to feel reward, right? If your dopamine's all screwed up too, nothing feels rewarding. This is actually a symptom. We call this anhedonia. Anhedonia, I'll type it in the chat here. Anhedonia is the inability to feel pleasure. It doesn't matter how rewarding a thing is, you cannot feel happy about it. This is a real problem among people in the addiction community, which is what makes recovery such a difficult thing for a lot of people because recovery is not rewarding. It's not fun. And then it's not rewarding. And then the parts that are rewarding, it is rewarding, actually. It really is. In real life, recovery is very rewarding. But not at that time, right? When you're first newly sober, any rewarding thing that is around you doesn't feel rewarding, right? So there's definitely different things that can happen. Sometimes it's treatable, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's curable, sometimes it isn't. I think I got a couple questions over here. Sorry, I whacked my microphone. Sad gang. Yeah, spell it for me there, please. Thank you. Yeah, it's good to see you, Sit Boo Boo Sit. I'm glad you're here. Okay. Sorry. Hi, can you talk about MS? Sure. Uh, so multiple sclerosis, right? MS is I believe, a congenital condition. I think you're born with it. Chronic disease affecting the central nervous system of the brain and spinal cord. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure people get have a mutation, a genetic mutation that leads to this. I'm not sure if it is hereditary. I almost want to say it isn't, but I need to look that up. I don't know for sure. But multiple sclerosis basically is when it's this weird condition that causes your immune system to, well, your immune system just attacks things it doesn't recognize, right? If it says, oh, this is a foreign body, kill it, get rid of it, isolate it, surround it, crunch it up, digest it, recycle it, but get it out of here. We don't need it. This is foreign and it's bad. And it'll do that nondescript. It just does that to whatever enters your body that shouldn't be there. Unfortunately, sometimes we have genetic mutations or some sort of other cause that leads your body to go, oh, I actually don't like this thing, even though it's a part of the body. And in the case of MS, that thing is your myelin that is coating your neurons. So your neurons, you have many different types of neurons for many different types of things. But you do have neurons that are the fastest, typically motor neurons, right? They need to move faster than your other neurons, which already move pretty damn fast. But these motor neurons are, in order to move faster, they are actually insulated with a sheath of myelin, right? This allows me to send a signal from my brain all the way down to my arm very quickly, like in real time as I want it to happen, right? It allows me to be able to do this. So, in order for that to work correctly, I need that insulation around the axons of these neurons because that's what's making the signal so quick, right? Not only that, but also due to all the movement and the motion and the stretching and twisting, they really need that insulation to keep them from being broken. The thing is that a cell can only be of a certain size. It can only have a certain amount of surface area before it is destroyed. Neurons can be very long. In fact, your longest neuron goes from your spine down to the tip of your big toe. That's a really long cell if you think about it. And for it to keep with the rule of surface area, that means that it is impossibly thin. So this neuron is going all the way down from your spine to your big toe, and it's so thin that you can't even see it with your own eye. You'd have to look under a microscope. As you can probably imagine, that's a very delicate thing for you to just be swinging around, right? So it definitely needs that insulator, your myelin sheath. And not only that, but the fact that you have tons of neurons all lined together, it's kind of like trying to break too many things of spaghetti. It becomes more difficult as you add spaghetti, right? So in the case of MS, your immune system sees that myelin sheath and goes, that's not good for me. I'm getting rid of that. Right. And over time, it starts to deteriorate that myelin sheath. And what ends up happening is you lose the ability to control your musculature. Right. The signals that should be sent to your muscles are not working because those neurons are now degrading. They're easier. The signal's not moving as fast as it needs to. So your movement is very impeded. You're much slower. And then the other thing is that your neurons are not as protected as they should be. So they're actually dying. And so you'll see people with like muscles that are like clenched, right? And they have trouble even like moving. Oftentimes you see kind of like this structure where the fingers are sort of all like clasped, almost like a claw, right? They can't extend properly. Um, yeah. Oh, your dad has MS. I'm sorry to hear that. I am not a doctor. I may work on my doctorate here at Yale. I'm a neuroscientist here at Yale studying pain research. I'm in a postdoc position, though I technically do not have my doctorate. But I was hired for the position because they thought I had the qualifications and they really wanted me to work there. I may be a doctor someday, but I'm not sure what I want to study yet. I'm not sure what I want to do yet. I'm thinking maybe prosthetics. I might go that route, but I'm still, and also high. Smarter than most doctors. Don't say that. Don't say that. But I appreciate you. Thank you for the compliment. Diagnosed with MS in 2019 after having a sixth nerve palsy. Ah, ouch. In your, sorry, is that in your face? Your sixth nerve in your face? I just did some videos. They're actually on my YouTube channel about cranial neuralgia or neuropathy rather. And I was going to do one on trigeminal neuralgia, which I will put out pretty soon, but I might put that on Neural Jack. So feel free, if somebody wants to type that in the chat, feel free to see my YouTube channel at Neural Jack. Right now, I'm live on YouTube at Jacko All Trades. Yes, there's lots to learn. I explain things better than your doc. I think, you know what the problem is? I think doctors have been going to school for such a long time that they forget what people know and what they don't. That's the problem, is the longer you're in it, the more of a divide there is between you, where you're at now, and you, who you were when you first started. And the you that you were when you first started is a lot closer to the people who are just starting, right? So it's like, oh, this you knows what they don't know. Okay, you can answer a lot of questions a lot easier. But as we get older, it's harder to do that because we forget. Let me see what's going on over here. Oh, referring to the people with anhedonia. Yeah, they basically become numb. Yeah. Not only do they not feel pleasurable things, but they also don't tend to really feel that much when bad things happen, right? They're just sort of numb to it all. I think that's kind of the point. But the problem is that, this is different depending on the drug. Alcohol, for instance, is a numbing agent, right? Alcohol is very inhibitory, right? And it starts at the prefrontal cortex right up front here, and it works its way back and then eventually works its way it starts at the prefrontal cortex and works its way back and then eventually works its way inward to the brainstem. Once we get here, that person dies from alcohol poisoning. That's why it works its way back, is because that's the last part you want to get hit with alcohol. But usually that's the person who's blacking out and passing out. So if you see somebody do that at a party, know that they're a lot closer to death than everybody probably thinks they are. Anywho, yeah, the problem with alcohol is you're pumping yourself with a inhibitory chemical. This thing dampens everything. The first thing it inhibits is your inhibitory processes, which leads to an overall effect of feeling amplified, like you feel really energetic. So notice that the person who's drinking after about 2 drinks feels really excited and really happy, ready to go. Woo, let's go. We're having a good time. That's because they've just inhibited their inhibitory processes. That's up front in the prefrontal cortex, right? But as it's moving back, this person then goes, whew, I feel really relaxed. I feel calm. I feel cool. I feel ready to eat something, right? And as they continue to drink, eventually they just start, becoming like inactive and eventually inoperable. They'll just pass out, right? But and even the conscious self can shut off. That's what happens when people black out, right? They're walking around blacked out. But the problem with people who drink alcohol for a very long time, a lot of it for a very long time, right? They suffer from alcoholism, is that kind of like the thing with the dopamine and the serotonin, right? If I'm pumping a ton of inhibitory chemical, which in this case is actually just CO2, sort of, into my brain's no longer going to make gamma aminobutyric acid, right? Which is the primary inhibitor chemical of the central nervous system. So your brain's going, oh, I'm too inhibited. I'm going to die. I'm going to stop making GABA. But also, I'm going to make more things like glutamate and things that are and epinephrine, or endorphins, things like whatever can get this person to wake up, right? Um, uh, so what ends up happening is when that person finally stops drinking, they can't calm down. They're really on edge. They're really irritable because they're overexcitable. Everything's like, if you think about, the stereotype, oh, it's too bright in here, right? But everything's too excitable. And one of the problems with this is that now their brain is no longer pumping out any inhibitory chemicals, and it's actively pumping out stimulatory chemicals, stimulants. And the problem with that is that then we start getting miscommunication. Oftentimes, people who have suffered from alcoholism for a really long time and then they just sober up without going to the hospital end up getting epilepsy, right? So, and that can kill them. Alcohol is probably one of the only drugs that can kill you from getting off of it. If you've drank it for long enough and in large enough quantities, I'm pretty sure it's the only drug that can kill you from just stopping it. It's probably not. There's probably other drugs, but like that's the main one, and it's legal, right? Which is scary when you think about it. Nurse approved. Oh, thank you. Look at the background. Ah, yeah. Also, if you're over on YouTube, you see my nice little corner now that I have. I got my desk set up and everything. Cause double vision. Yeah. Yeah, because, that sixth nerve is... So for anybody who doesn't know, the sixth nerve, your cranial nerves, you've got 12 main ones. There's more than that, but you've got like 12 main ones. And the sixth one, along with a lot of other ones, controls the muscles on the outside of your eye. And so when you have that neuropathy in the sixth nerve, you end up having your eyes kind of like they misalign. So oftentimes you'll get double vision, right? But also, if you want to correct that double vision, the person has to kind of like tilt their head a little bit to fix it. The muscles don't quite move the eye correctly. Usually, to my understanding, it usually only affects one side of the face. But please correct me if I'm wrong about that. Doctors do have a broad area of study for sure. Neural Jack. Harmony is beautiful. Aw, we're awesome. Thank you. We think you're awesome. 12 Paw Gang. Oh, good. I'm glad that I could broaden your horizons. It's pretty cool when we can kind of like think about things in a little bit of a different way. That was a relatively I always knew that reward kind of worked that way, but what was new to me was the idea that reward isn't a happy feeling, or like reward isn't necessarily rewarding, right? Rather, it's habit. Or let me think. The thing that's new to me is that dopamine circuits specifically, are not necessarily rewarding. They're habit forming, right? And there's a difference. All the cigarettes and alcohol. Yeah. Hey, you know what? I quit smoking 5.5 years ago, and I don't miss it. Not even a little bit. I am so glad I finally quit smoking. I've saved so much money that I could put a down payment on a house. I don't have that money, mind you, because I spent it in tacos. But had I not spent it in tacos, I would have put a down payment on a house. Highly recommend. I don't think you'll miss it. Once you're done with it, 2-3 weeks over it, not gonna miss it. Not even a little. You'll feel a million times better. You'll breathe better, exercise more. Never got addicted to cigarettes, and you smoked with your friends. It was bizarre. Yeah, that is really bizarre, especially because nicotine is one of the most habit forming. Although nicotine's mechanism of habit formation is totally different than the typical psychoactive substance. Because the typical psychoactive substance works off of those two chemicals, serotonin and dopamine, right? Usually, along with others. There are other psychoactive substances like alcohol, which affect your GABA receptors. But nicotine, so when we talk about the muscles and we talk about memory formation, we talk about like cholinergic neurons. They produce like choline, and then that choline is modified to become acetylcholine, right? An acetyl group gets bonded to it, so it becomes acetylcholine. And acetylcholine goes out into the synapse of muscles, and it also is very important for memory formation in the hippocampus. So acetylcholine goes out, and then it gets rapidly eaten really quick. So new choline needs to be bound to new acetyl groups to make new acetylcholine rapidly. This process needs to happen rapidly, and it also needs to rapidly degrade because I want to move precisely when I mean to move, and I want to stop moving precisely when I mean to stop moving, right? And the funny thing about nicotine is that, which is kind of why we refer to cholinergic neurons as nicotinic neurons, is because nicotine works just like acetylcholine. So when you smoke it, it's a stimulant and it stimulates your mind and your muscles. However, people find a calming effect because your body will and your brain will rapidly counteract it. They're like, oh, we don't want that. Counteract it. So they pump your system more full of GABA. You relax, right? It's your body's combatants against nicotine. So that's why some people smoke to be calm. Usually it takes about 2 cigarettes to do that. Kind of interesting. Makes your stomach contract acetylcholine. Yeah, true. And actually, it gets all your smooth muscles going too, because it's a basic stimulant, right? So all stimulants do this. They get your muscles going. That's why people who have their coffee and a smoke in the morning have to have their morning poop right after, right? It just like pushes everything out. After the natural drugs. Yeah, yeah. It's all natural, right? Everything's chemicals. We don't need those things. You don't need those things. You already have them in you. They wouldn't work if you didn't already have the mechanisms in here. Some people need them, right? Like if you go to a doctor, you have a problem that your body or your brain is not able to help you with, then yeah, seek medical help. Seek a medical professional, someone who is a professional, knows what they're talking about, has gone to school for it. Sometimes you got to do a bit of shopping around and find the right person who will work with you because some people really don't understand your body at all. If you are someone who identifies as a woman, you should probably see a physician that likely identifies as a woman as well. Uh, if you can. Not everybody gets that option, but if you can, you should take it. You want to talk to people that are familiar with yourself and your anatomy. Rose in the ground. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it all starts that way, right? We make alcohol from things that grow in the ground. We make acid from things that grow in the ground. Methamphetamine? Nah, maybe not so much. Cocaine, definitely. Right, yeah. Men usually do disqualify anything as just, oh, you must be having lady issues. And I've met some women that did that too, but not anywhere near as often. But that sucks, though. It's like just totally discounts everything you're saying about yourself, you know? And you're like, and if you know your body, you would know if you're having those issues, right? Because you'd be like, hey, this feels like when I'm having those issues. So the fact that you're here means that you're really worried. It's probably not those issues, you know? You have both Alice in Wonderland syndrome and voluntary, what is that? Pular erection? I feel like a mutant. Let me look that up. I don't know what that is. Bristling of hair is due to the involuntary contractions of small muscles at the base of hair follicles. I didn't even realize you had little muscles at the base of your hair follicles. That totally makes sense. I don't know why that never occurred to me. I didn't realize muscles like went that far into your skin. Cats have this, right? That's how their whiskers operate. Mice, their whiskers operate that way too. I don't know why it never occurred to me that our hair standing up works off that same mechanism. I didn't think it was a muscle. I didn't think it was musculature doing that. Ability to give yourself goosebumps on command. So you kind of have like reflexive control of that muscles. Those muscles. That's interesting. I've never heard of that. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being a mutant. We're all mutants in our own way. Right. The voluntary. Yes, I've never heard of anybody being able to do that before. I mean, people can kind of make it happen to themselves if they're like freaking themselves out, right? Like ghost hunters and shit. But yeah, I've never met anybody who is actively able to be like, watch me move my hair on my arm. It's pretty interesting. Yeah. I don't need to try it. I already know I can't. When you learn that, yeah, that's really funny too. That's really funny when you go your whole life thinking everybody else can do something. Right. I didn't even know I could try that. It just never occurred to me. How'd it go, Harm? Confirm that you can't. Yeah, yeah, I'm pretty sure I can't. Yeah, that's really interesting. Oh, the Alice in Wonderland syndrome. Um, I have experienced that, but I don't really want to talk about it, but not permanently. I know people who experience it too, and I've also met a lot of people who have experienced it after doing psychedelics. Usually, if you experience it after psychedelics, you don't, it's not permanent though, although it can be lasting for quite a while. I think it usually goes away after a couple of days, but sometimes it can last weeks. Alice in Wonderland syndrome is this really strange phenomenon where your occipital lobe, which is for your visual processing, so you have like it's kind of hard to see on this model because this isn't like the best model. I'll show it here too. You have these two little branches coming out right here and right here. They're like kind of little nubs right here and right here. This is your optic chiasm. This is where your eyeballs go. So that information runs down into these two little nubs, and then it goes all the way through your thalamus, relay, whatever, the optic chiasm to the cortex, the occipital lobe in the back of the head. And there's a region in the right hemisphere of the occipital lobe when it miscommunicates, you get distortions in perception. And you can get distortions in perception of how you're visualizing time. Thanks for the likes. You can also get distortions in your perception of size. My twin brother experienced this one time and he went to the hospital for it because he kept going, Doctor, I don't know what's wrong with me. And the doctor's like, well, what is wrong with you? You look fine. And he'd go, one of my arms is way bigger than the other one. And the moment the doctor was like, that's not true. You're fine. My brother's reality kind of got put back into place. He kind of came back down to earth, you know. Sometimes you get this weird scoping in and out. It's almost like it's sort of like if you're looking at your friend's face. I don't know if this is how it manifests with you, but some people describe like a bubbling. Like you might look at someone's face and their one like chunk of their face might bubble out a little bit and like kind of go back in. Different warping things can happen. Recent medical journal out there referencing the subreddit fast feeling. I've never seen that subreddit. MD season 8, episode 1. Okay, I'll have to check it out. I never really watched House. I remember seeing a couple episodes. I thought it was kind of fun, but well, yeah, it is quite the ride. It's not super fun. For the person experiencing it, it's not very fun. I mean, maybe everybody's different. Maybe some people like that kind of stuff. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not one who really likes my reality distorted. I used to when I was younger. And as I've gotten older, I don't. I actually like to experience reality close to how it actually is rather than messing with it. I'm glad I went through that phase to mess with it a little bit and note that there are different versions of reality, I guess, but I like being in the real reality, or at least as close to it as I can understand. Prosopagnosia was wild after learning about it in abnormal psych. Why am I blanking on that? I know what prosopagnosia is. Inability to see faces. Is that what it is? Face blindness. Yeah. So with prosopagnosia, what's going on is that's the fusiform face area. So like when we're talking about the Alice in Wonderland syndrome, here's the brain, the top of the brain, right? And here's the front of your face, and this is the back of your head down here. So this is the occipital lobe back here. And when we're talking about the Alice in Wonderland, let's see, this is your right side. On TikTok, it looks like your left, but this is your right side. Back here in this region, when there's disruption, this is where the Alice in Wonderland syndrome happens. If you were to like just crack the brain open a little and look on the left side, right about here-ish is the fusiform face area. What is it? FFA, fusiform face area. So the FFA, when you have damage to it or disruption in communication, what ends up happening is you're not able to put faces together. So you actually can't recognize the people that you see. Instead, you have to learn to, sorry about that, you have to learn to recognize their voice or other characteristics. So let me just like to clarify, you can see aspects of their face. So a person with problems in the fusiform face area that has prosopagnosia, when they look at a face, they go, this is an eyeball. This is the characteristics of this eyeball. This eyeball is hazel. Here's the eye shape. It's a little bit dark underneath. Who do I know that has an eyeball like that? Here's an eyebrow. Oh, it's kind of like thick, sort of wild right there. Oh, look, a scar. Who do I know that has an eyebrow like that? And then I notice the nose. Oh, there's a septum ring. Well, I only have one friend that has a septum ring. That's Jared, right? I must be talking to, and it sounds like Jared's voice. I must be talking to Jared. So they can see the different aspects of your face. They can't put it together as one face, though, which is a really strange thing. Oliver Sacks talked about this in his book, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. He had a couple patients that suffered from that, and he wrote about it. Yeah. Abnormal Psych is a cool class, too. I loved that class. That's one of my favorite classes to teach. Anomalisa? Never heard of it. It's a good movie about it, though. Okay, I'll check it out. Man, I know I've learned so much that I forget more than I know. I hear words and I'm like, I definitely know what that is. Why can't I think of what that is? Oh yeah, nystagmus. I had a friend who had that. It was really strange. Like he had glasses, and whenever we talk, he'd look you right in the eyes, but his eyes would be like shaking all the time. They're just wiggling. It's really strange. Which our eyes actually do that already. If you didn't know, your eyes wiggle. That's actually part of how you see depth, and it's how you're keeping track of motion. And it's how it's your eyes do this for a lot of reasons. One of the main important reasons your eyes wiggle like that your eyes do this, is so that you can turn your head and keep your eyes stationary on an object as you turn your head. So believe it or not, as you're moving your head, your eyes aren't staying still, right? If they stayed still, they would move with your head, but they're not staying still, right? So your eyes are actually moving the opposite direction of your head. And by wiggling very minutely, it's so minute that you can't even see it with your own eye. Um, or rather, someone can't perceive your eyes wiggling with their own eyes. Um, but it's all for that sort of motion stuff. But people who have that nystagmus, right? You can actually see the eye like jumping around really fast. Oh yeah, capgrass. Yeah, Oliver Sacks had a story about that too, and you can believe that. So capgras syndrome, you think everybody around you is an imposter, right? You, I forget what part of the brain this occurs in. Like if you, I know it's a specific part of the brain you receive damage to that you'll have that syndrome. And I forget which part of the brain. But what ends up happening is like you'll see somebody that you've known your whole life, and you're absolutely certain that it's not them. That the government has made an exact copy. You know, Ashton Kutcher is punking you. Something is happening, right? But that's not the real person, and you are convinced. And this doesn't only just happen to people about other people; it can happen to you about yourself. One guy that Oliver Sacks wrote about in his book, one of his books, I forget which one. He wrote so many, and they're all amazing. I have a ton of them on my shelf. But in one of his books, he talked about a guy who woke up in the hospital after having surgery, and I believe he had like a brain tumor or something. Maybe he had epilepsy or something, and it damaged part of his parietal cortex, which is up here. So you have your frontal cortex, your frontal lobe, and then you have your parietal, which runs right about here, right? And then your occipital is back here. But your parietal runs right about here, and right. I guess you can kind of see it on the model. I sort of drew like a line here, but right in the front area where you're going into your frontal cortex is all of your motor on your all your motor around your body. And then the other side of that line is all your sensation on the body. I might have mixed those two up. Either way, you have a couple of what are called homunculi. So each homunculus represents the body, the whole body in its entirety. And one is for the sensation of your body, the other one's for your um, motor of the body or touch of the body. Sorry, touch is the sensation, the other one's motor. So you can feel what part of your body's moving. Anyway, this guy got damage to his parietal lobe somehow. I forget how. He might have hit his head or something. But what ended up happening was he woke up and he immediately got pissed off because his leg was not his leg. The doctors had cut it off and put someone else's leg and reattached someone else's leg to his leg. And he's like, this is messed up because I came here because I had a head injury and then I trusted you. And then when I woke up, you put someone else's leg on me. And the doctors are like, this is the strangest thing I've ever seen, right? They're like, what are you talking about, man? Why would we ever do that? And also, how does your leg work so good if we just replaced it? Like that's not possible. You realize how that's not possible, right? And he's utterly convinced someone's playing a joke on me. This is a sick prank. You know, he's getting so mad. He's like, cut it off. Take my leg off. I don't want this. And they had to go, well, look at the hair of your other leg, right? Your left leg, that's your leg, right? And he's like, yeah, that's my leg. Of course it's my leg. They're like, well, look at your right leg. It has the same kind of hair on it. The skin looks the same. It feels the same, right? And he had to go, yeah, okay, it's a really good copy, but it's not my leg, right? And it took him, I don't think he ever was fully convinced that it was his leg. Really strange story. Yet another good reason to pick up a man who mistook his wife for that. Oh, you have the dancing eyes. You're welcome. Yes, lots of fascinating things. I did speak on Capgrass, so good. I got to it. Everything is 2D. Oh, that must be really. I would feel kind of annoyed. Pay attention to depth. Yeah. Yeah, the depth thing happens with people who are born blind and then have their vision restored after the age of 3. Sometimes they actually can't even make sense of the vision that's been recovered. But when they can, oftentimes they see in 2 dimensions. Anything I have to share about the amygdala? Sure. I don't know that I have that much, but what we know about the amygdala now, I'll share a few facts. So the amygdalae are kind of attached at the central gyrus and the hippocampus. So like you have like here's your corpus callosum, right, which is where the hemispheres are communicating back and forth between each other. And then you have the caudate, right? The caudate nucleus, which is this sort of weird alien looking structure right here. Okay. And then the caudate nucleus actually wraps around down in there. So if you like just pull this piece out, I guess. Down at the bottom here, you have the hippocampus, which is like this little tiny seahorse structure that's down here. And at the very tip, hold on. Yeah, I guess it's not visible on this model. I need to get a better model. But at the very tip down here, just right here, is like a little pea-sized formation that's called your amygdala. You have one on each side of your brain, so they're amygdalae, it's plural. And they are responsible and necessary for processing excitement. Okay. And we used to think that they were just necessary for fear because we learned that people who have damaged amygdalae cannot feel fear. They don't feel afraid of anything. And not only that, but animals who have damage to their amygdalae don't feel fear either. I remember reading a paper about mice that had their amygdalae ablated, and then they were put in the presence of a cat. The cat was kind enough that it wouldn't mess with the mice, right? So this was a trained cat that would not kill the mice. The cat wouldn't even touch the mice. It was trained to just leave the mice alone. But mice, by nature, a normal mouse, if you've ever, I don't know, not a lot of people hang out with mice. I do because I'm in research. But if you ever interact with a mouse, it will run from you instantly. It does not care. It doesn't matter. It's just going to run away. Mice like to burrow into their little hole and they want you to leave them alone. That's just how they operate. And a lot of this works off of how their fear circuits work, right? So if you ablate, if you cut, sever a mouse's amygdala, that mouse will then go explore the cat, which would never happen in nature. Mice do not hang out with cats. A rat, maybe, if they've spent enough time with the cat. If they grew up with the cat, maybe. But mice will never spend time with the cat, not purposefully. But what they found is when they ablated the amygdala, the mouse was no longer afraid of the cat. It would just hang out with the cat, explore it, sniff it, nibble at it, whatever. But it wouldn't run away. Or run away from anything for that matter. We've since learned that the amygdala in the human is not just responsible for fear processing. We know because of this one gal, I forget her name, but she had been in a car accident, I think, and she suffered damage to her amygdala. She could no longer feel fear. And they were testing her out with like horror movies and stuff, just like trying to get her to feel scared. She's like, yeah, it's an interesting movie. But I no longer feel afraid of it. When previously she would get scared really easy, right? Which is dangerous. You want to be able to feel fear when you're supposed to, right? Like, if you don't ever feel fear, you're going to put yourself in dangerous situations. But since then, we've learned that it's not just fear. It's actually anything really excitable, even positively excitable, like something that makes you happy, excited, right? You need the amygdala for that kind of processing. And the other thing we've learned is that the way the amygdala, which makes sense why it's attached to the hippocampus, right? Because your hippocampus is all about learning and memory. So if your amygdala is firing off, that's telling you, hey, I should pay attention to what's happening. I may need to remember this, right? This is an excitable thing. I probably should pay attention, right? It's getting my attention. So it makes sense that the caudate nucleus, the hippocampus, and the amygdala are all sort of tied up in that circuitry. And the central gyrus too, but that's anyway. The other thing I know is that this may be a potential mechanism for some of the things we see with like alcoholism, because alcoholics tend to have deeper or like kind of thicker amygdalae at the bottom. The amygdalae are kind of like cup-like structures, and at the bottom is a little bit thicker in most alcoholics, according to fMRI studies. I don't know how true that is now, because that's like a finding that was like 10 years ago, so I have no idea. Could have changed by then, you know. Things are always being updated. But yeah, it kind of makes sense though, right? That they would have bigger, maybe overactive amygdalae, alcoholics would, because they're kind of overstimulated by everything, like I was saying earlier. Sorry if I'm not keeping up with the comments fast enough. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you like it. Yeah, we get pretty weird over here. Feeling like what? I can't remember. I wasn't paying attention. Oh, yeah, like your leg isn't yours. It's a super weird thing to understand. I don't think you can understand it unless you experience it. You're a mouse. Yeah, sure. I love answering questions. That's why I'm here. Yes, emotions are integral to human survival. Yeah, in fact, they're so integrated into our survival that they're actually like this is weird to say, but there's something to speak about genetics, right? Only people who are like on the autism spectrum disorder have trouble with understanding and processing emotions, and people who have just general problems with their anterior temporal cortex and their prefrontal cortex, because they have processes like trouble with processes involving empathic processing. Okay, so they have a hard time seeing from another person's perspective. But when you think about emotion, it doesn't matter what emotion we're talking about. We all know what that emotion is by seeing it on someone else's face. And when we see it on someone else's face, we can kind of feel it in ourselves because our cortex can replicate it through the use of mirror neurons, right? See what their face is doing. Pretend your face is doing that. Okay, what do you feel like because of your face doing that you're pretending that your face is doing that? Which is a process that most humans use often. There are certain humans who can't, right? They usually have some sort of disorder. They're not able to do that. But if you go to the most like remote places in the world, literally tribes that have never interacted with other human beings ever before, you can ask them, hey, do you know what this emotion is? And they know what that emotion is because they have a word for it because they do it too. So that tells me that we are actually born with the neural mechanisms needed to process emotion, except in the instances of having some sort of disorder, which is really weird because when you think of emotions, you don't really think hard science. When you think of how people emote, you don't really like think, oh, this person was born with that ability. That really feels like something you should learn over time. But it's not. It's actually something that's innate to humans. Our emotions are innate to us. And other primates have emotions that are innate to them too. And certain emotions in primates are not the same as emotions in humans. A human who smiles is happy. A primate who smiles is indicating that they're dangerous or that there is danger present and that you need to run away or they'll kill you. Although sometimes I've met humans that smile before they get dangerous. What's like Timmy Turner? I can't keep up with my own self. My own bullshit. I do love Fairly Odd Parents. That was such a good cartoon when I was little. Addiction Field, which is what sparked my interest in the limbic system. Yeah, totally. I would move away from calling it addiction, though. I know I called it addiction. I normally correct myself. It's like chemical use disorders, right? Substance use, or whatever. Addiction's a weird term. We should probably stop using it. It's just not a very good term. Alcoholism on both sides. Alcoholism is definitely hereditary too. Tell you you're fearless. Locked his emotions away. Oh my goodness. That's like a horrifying thing to do to somebody. Science should pay more attention to emotion and not leave it to therapists. That's true. It's very true. Substance use and trauma. When would you want to do that? Yeah. What else? So I finally got set up. I know everybody on TikTok cannot see, but I have like a desk and a chair now. I feel like fancy. I got my microphone and everything. It's wonderful. So hopefully I'll be able to make some better content.
I mean, preferably.
If you haven't yet, you should go subscribe to Neural Jack and check out my first video there on YouTube. It's my first like real YouTube video where I like edit it and tried to make it look nice. It's definitely not nice by any means, but you know, I'm doing the best with what I have. I'm very new to all this. So if you want to, feel free to leave a comment, and feedback is always welcome. I want to know more. I want to do better, be able to teach people. Substance use and trauma makes perfect sense. Humans are supposed to feel good. Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know if we are supposed to feel good. I would actually argue that we maybe aren't. And before I move forward, I'll actually expand on that a bit. So I think all life is not necessarily made to feel good, but rather made to survive. And I think sometimes we feel good by taking pain away. I think that some things feel good because evolutionarily it makes sense, like eating high sugar or high caloric foods, right? Evolutionarily, that makes sense that you're going to get a little serotonin boost out of your potatoes. You're going to get a little dopamine from your fatty steak and your sugar, because that will lend to your survival. But I don't know that humans are supposed to feel good. And the reason why is because good and bad are arbitrary concepts that humans made up. Like we say dying is bad, but we neglect the fact that literally every single thing on earth that ever has lived and ever will live will die. So why is it bad? It literally has to happen to everybody and everything, every plant, every ant, every person, every single thing, right? Sorry, I'm being a big old bummer. But like in reality though, maybe it's not a bad thing. Maybe it's just a thing that happens to all of us that we all get to experience together. Yay. Anyway, my point is, if everything were good all the time, it would just be normal. There would be no more good. It would just be normal, right? I wouldn't feel good about it. I would feel normal about it. If everything were bad all of the time, it wouldn't feel bad. It would just feel normal, right? So it doesn't make sense that humans could or should feel good all the time. It makes sense that we need to feel bad sometimes and feel good other times, because it's the bad feeling that makes us realize the good feeling. And alternatively, it's also the good feeling that makes us realize the bad feeling. There's a balance, and we need to have both. Otherwise, we won't know which way to go. You know? That's my little nitpicky argument about that. Yeah, on substance use disorder. Maybe we will sometime. Maybe we can do that next week. That can be our focus on our Friday night live. If you want to join us, that'll be at 8 p.m. again, Eastern Standard Time. Love to learn more about the brain processes. Oh, how the brain processes trauma and how it relates to substance abuse. Um, that one's difficult. That one's difficult because that's difficult to answer because there's so many different things that can be happening. The one thing that comes to the top of my mind is when people suffer from trauma, there is often a degree of brain damage associated with that trauma. And there can be damage in terms of memory formation, right? Because when somebody experiences a severe trauma, there's different things happening. One is they become hyper focused, usually, like especially if it's a physical trauma or something just really scary. Say they're in a car accident, right? They become hyper focused in the moment as it's happening. But in not in a sense of, hey, pay attention, you need to remember this. It's more, hey, pay attention, you need to save your ass right now. Try to survive. And because of that, you're in this really weird state, emotionally speaking. Here's another reason why emotions are so important is because emotions are heavily tied with memory. We use emotions as retrieval cues for memories. And so if I'm in a good mood, I'm more likely to remember good memories. And if I'm in a bad mood, I'm more likely to remember bad memories. And if I'm in a good mood, but I remember a bad memory, I typically will re remember it as being better than it was. And if I'm in a bad mood and I remember a good memory, I'll typically remember it as being worse than it actually was, right? Because we reconstruct our memories every time we have them. And that's very tied to our emotion, right? Our emotional state is the retrieval cue. When you're in an accident or something heavily traumatic, you are in a state of emotion that is not normal. And because it's not normal, you're encoding that information in a way that is not normal. Your brain doesn't exactly know what to do with it. Your brain is very systematic about what it does. So it's going to shove that information wherever it systematically shoves it, right? The problem is, how do I go back and access that information? You can't really do that unless you re enter that emotional state. But you can't really re enter that emotional state because it's not going to happen naturally. It was an accident, it was something very different from the norm, very unexpected, right? So oftentimes people repress memories through that mechanism. People also can use alcohol and other chemical substances to repress memories through a similar mechanism because you can use chemical substances to alter your state of emotion, right? That's why some people can only remember things when they're drunk, right? They get drunk, they black out, they do whatever, they get sober, and they're like, I can't remember anything that happened. But the moment they start drinking again, they're like, oh, yeah, I remember what happened, right? It's because it was encoded during that state. Hello, what's up, Greedy Vices? Cool. To be human is to suffer. I don't believe dying is bad either. I think we should get away from that kind of thinking. I think it's very taboo to talk about dying, but really, I think if we talked about it more, it would probably be less upsetting for us when it happened. Built to avoid things that could lead to death happening sooner than needed. True. We'll try anyway, and procreate in the meantime, hopefully. Right? Like that's all of evolution. Try not to die. Have sex while you're at it. Make more of you. Make more of you and make as many as you can and make them as diverse as you can so that they can potentially survive other horrifying things. And that's not just true of humans, that's true of literally every creature on this planet and uh, literally any living thing on this planet. Plants too, right? Fungi too. Supposed to feel like it's surviving, hopefully. Yeah, sometimes we feel like we're barely surviving. chasing pleasure means chasing needs being met beyond basic, and that promotes longevity. It is true that, well, if you think about it, right, we want shelter, we want food, we want a potential mate, we want somewhere safe to sleep, right? I guess that's shelter. Um, we want to be safe. And all the weird things that we do every day, all the crazy, intricate things, me being a neuroscientist, somebody being a fry cook, some other guy being an accountant, some woman being really good at tennis, you know, dudes playing golf, doesn't matter. Everybody's all doing a weird, crazy, roundabout version of just trying to get their needs met. you know, and if you can have fun doing it, you might as well, right? That's why I want the YouTube thing to work out. Hopefully, I can start teaching people. But like Just Larry was saying, I think he's gone now. But if I can monetize and make a living off of it, that would be great. Because then I could have fun making video content and I could survive and get my needs met. But I really don't mind being a researcher. I do like neuroscience. I like helping people. You love the study that showed humans will choose mild frustration over other emotions. Well, I think that mild frustration makes us feel like we're learning something. It can be rewarding in its own way. And hence the difference between rewarding feeling good and rewarding being like actually rewarding or habit forming, right? Society is revolving around dopamine boosts. Escaping baselines is what primes us for substance use disorders. I don't know about that. I think there's a lot of things that prime us for substance use disorder. Genetics is one of them, right? We already discussed that if you have parents that are alcoholics, chances are you're going to be one too, because it's hereditary. If you are an alcoholic, your sibling likely will also experience problems with substance use disorder. And maybe they won't. It's just that they do have a higher likelihood, right? So genetics is one factor. Trauma is another factor. Environment, growing up, is a factor. Do other people do drugs in that environment? Does it feel safe to you? Are you used to it? How old were you when you were first exposed to the substance, meaning you ingested it or took it in somehow? How long have you been taking in the substance? In what quantity have you been taking in the substance? But especially what age were you at? But then all those other things too. All of these things can work to prime an individual towards substance use disorder, right? The dopamine boost thing is different, I feel like. Although many substances do work off your dopaminergic circuits. Some work off your serotonergic circuits. Some work off your GABA proteins, right? The proteins that like to have GABA attached to them. They can also have, the chemical compounds that alcohol is producing attached to them, and other depressants, right? Or like Oxycontin, or those kinds of things. Heroin, opiates, opiate derivatives. I don't know why I'm blanking on the names of those. But so it's not just dopamine, right? It's different things, and it's going to depend. Society is revolving around dopamine for sure. Dopamine boosts. But I feel like that is not totally unrelated to addiction, but it is a separate issue. It's not unrelated, but it is separate, right? There have been a lot of people on TikTok talking about how, 7-second videos are being pushed by the algorithm because it's purposefully shortening your attention span. And I can tell you that based on my knowledge of what was learned by psychologists in the 40s and 50s, And what the government and most media have been practicing based off of that knowledge since then. So 70, 80 years of research that the government and media have both been doing to try to subliminally mess with our minds. It gets you to buy stuff, gets you to sit down and enjoy your beer and watch your TV and be entertained. And don't worry about anything that's going on outside your door. And the processes of TikTok are very much heavily related to that research. The same idea that, oh, the 7-second videos being pushed is so that people's attention spans are growing shorter. That's a true thing. I can get you to gamble that way. I can get you to give me all your money that way, right? You have 7 seconds to win $1 billion. Oh, you didn't this time, but you might next time. Try again, right? Just keep pushing that button. Just keep pushing that button. And we very much need to do exercises that do the opposite of that. Attach more meaning to it because we're unique like that. Yes, we are very unique. Well, we're not totally unique, but we're unique in the way that we're perceiving us. Just double check. The study says we chose mild frustration and anger over others. That's very interesting, but also I'm not surprised. Thanks for all the love. I don't remember what I said that everybody's like, oh, definitely, yeah. Reconstructing my memories so often. Yes, I'm probably like, I don't know. The memory can be viewed from so many different angles, and each emotion is a different angle. Yeah, because the thing is people feel like their memories are reconstructed as a video, and that's not true. Some people can't reconstruct memories that way. Some people can only reconstruct photographs, and some people can't even do that. Some people can only reconstruct a story. And what's important about this is that, okay, I'm going to sidetrack, go off on a tangent. Did you know most people can't remember what happened before they were 3 years old? We hypothesize that the reason they can't remember anything that happened before they were 3 is because they start learning how to talk around then, like really well. Of course, you're able to say like 2-word sentences, right? Like give milk or meet up or something, right? But once you turn 3, you start actually like putting some serious sentences together, And so what ends up happening is now that you're learning how to put sentences together and use language in a way that you can interact with other humans, that's the important thing. You start encoding memories through dialogue, right? And so, like I said, retrieval cues are necessary, right? So when you're telling a story, you're remembering it as you're telling it because you encoded it through dialogue. Little baby you before 3 years old couldn't do that. So little baby you has different retrieval mechanisms for that memory or for those memories. So it's not that you can't remember it. It's the memory is still there. You just don't have access to it because you no longer use that retrieval cue that you used to store it. And you might not ever again because who knows what the heck you were using, right? It was probably different for everybody. But like, how do I know what I was using? I'm not using it anymore and I haven't my whole life. Except for that one little narrow part of the beginning of my life. Let's see. Yeah, so another thing is memories are literally just synapses firing at different times and at different rates. And, we have dendrites. Here's my little neuron. He's cute. My neuron's cell body is where his eyeballs are, right? This is his cell body. Branching off of his body are dendrites, okay? Dendrites are what are receiving the information. On the dendrites, really teeny tiny, if you look down in there, are these little tiny spines. They're called dendritic spines. Can you guess why? They're on the dendrites. Okay, good. These little dendritic spines are where information comes into the neuron. And this information can be either excitatory or it can be inhibitory. We call excitatory postsynaptic potentials, EPSPs, and inhibitory postsynaptic potentials, IPSPs, right? So you can have processes that'll make the neuron fire, or you'll have processes that keep the neuron from firing, right? If you put a bunch of these little dendritic spines together on a bunch of different neurons and get them all to get information at the same time in a specific pattern, then you have the formation of a memory. You've remembered a memory. Okay, so that's how memory is being stored, is somehow through dendritic processes in the cortex, throughout the whole cortex. Your cells metabolize over time. So they need to remove garbage, they need to get new nutrients, and they need to rebuild these spines. And they need to build new spines, and they need to take away old spines that they're not useful, right? So the longer time after that memory was first formed, the more distorted that memory becomes unless you're continuously re-remembering it all the time. And the longer you wait between re-remembering that memory, the more distortion that occurs. You forget what color cup was on your shelf. You forget, what shirt you were wearing that one special day. But your brain doesn't like to have discontinuity. So your brain will start filling information in. Well, obviously the cup was red. And your shirt was that striped shirt that you had. It was green and gray stripes. And then you finally look back at a picture and it shows that you were wearing blue and gray stripes. And you're like, I could have sworn it was green and gray. That was my favorite shirt. I love that shirt. It was always green and gray. Am I tripping out? You're not tripping out. It's just that piece of information was so useless to you for such a long time that by the time you re-brought out the memory, it had already been distorted enough that your brain just needed to fill something in. Right? Thanks for all the likes. It's very sweet of you. Yeah, so every time we re-remember, we're refiring those synapses, and then your cells have to remetabolize to strengthen those synapses to keep them in working order. Because the way you keep that memory is by remembering it. Otherwise, it's useless. Might as well get rid of it. So who knows? Maybe your baby memories are gone forever. Maybe they're not. Maybe some weird bastardized version of them is still stuck with you forever, right? And just out of reach anyway, so what does it matter? I've had my mind try to convince me that certain people that caused me trauma didn't really exist. That's not uncommon. That's actually not uncommon at all. And in fact, that is a coping mechanism that people actively used in the 60s and 70s from people coming back from Vietnam. I have one friend who is absolutely convinced that his experience in Vietnam, the dude is 75 now, I think, but his experience there, he's convinced was just him watching a TV show. He didn't actually live it. He watched it. It was a movie, and it was through someone else's eyes. But he saw it through their eyes, but it was just a movie that he watched. That's all. How to navigate our thoughts. Are you asking a question or just saying? Yeah, using drugs and partying to cope. Totally. I did that for a long time too. And you know what? I want to be mad at myself for it, but at some point I have to admit to myself that was probably, thank you for the rose. That was probably keeping me alive at that time. That's what you'll find when you use drugs that way or alcohol that way. Anything that way. It could be sex, right? It could be anything. When you use it that way, it works during the time that you're using it, but at some point it stops being useful, and so it stops working. And because it's the only mechanism you really know and understand, you keep trying to use it, but it won't work anymore. And it's at that point that you have to make a choice to do something different because it's just not going to work anymore. You've evolved past it. It's time to do something else. Thank you for saying that. I'm really glad that you're getting something out of this. I'm getting a lot out of it too. It's nice to kind of remember a lot of this stuff. Keeps my synapses going. I really appreciate that sentiment. Hey, if you haven't already, maybe subscribe to Neural Jack on YouTube. You'll get to see more. You can interact with me more. Next Friday Night Live, I'm going live on that channel. So come follow me there. And maybe Harmony will go live with me and we can talk about substance use disorders and trauma. Seem to learn multiple languages easier younger. That's actually exactly why that is. We found that people who learn multiple languages growing up, typically their language development is a little bit impeded at first, but over time they catch up with everybody else. And on top of that, they've learned an extra language. The thing about being little, though, and this is also the magic number, is about 3 years old, 4 years old. But, or maybe it's like about 4 or 5, I think. But it's during that period that kids are able to pick up on phonemes. So what a phoneme is, it's the smallest sound that can be made that can be used to construct a word, right? So like the letter A in the English language has multiple phonemes associated with it. One of them is A. Another one is ah, and another one is a, right? So A, and a are all phonemes, right? The word phoneme contains the phonemes pho and ne and m, right? Phoneme. And if I smash these, and probably more than that, honestly, but if I smash those phonemes together, I make phoneme, right? So there are phonemes that kids cannot, they have to pick them up young or you can't hear them later. You literally can't hear them unless you specifically learn them and make an effort to recognize them. And that takes a lot of work later on, especially with like English speakers trying to learn Chinese, right? Because, you'll hear a Chinese person say like cha, 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 ti, and you're just saying cha, 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 cha to me. But the inflection is like different, right? Similarly with like Japanese people, right? There's like this sort of comedic thing that maybe should be joked about less, but there's this joke about mixing up the R's and L's, right? And the reason why is because Japanese people do not have an R the way we have an R. So if they grow up as little kids in Japan and they never learn English ever as little kids, and then they become adults and then learn English, you'll notice that they have a problem with saying words with R or words with L because they have a phoneme that's actually in between the English L and R. It's right? So I'm trying to think of an example. I don't know. It's sort of stereotypical though. So it's like not something you really want to play around with. But the idea is yeah. Anyway, the idea is that sometimes you'll see someone who is Japanese mix up their R's and L's because they have that middle sound. And is not really something, if I'm saying it to you, you might not actually be, if you are from the US and speak English and you've never spoken Japanese and you're an adult, you probably don't even know what I just said. You may have heard it as or but it's in the middle. And so like, I don't know. I don't know how better to explain that. So yes, there is that period of time when you're very little, you have to pick up on those phonemes or you'll lose it. Not entirely. You can't. Oh, another good example is the German ich, right? So a lot of people say ich, like when they're trying to say I am, ich bin, they'll say ich bin, or they'll say ich bin, right? People who speak English say ich or they say ich because we don't have the phoneme ich, right? And it's like when you hear me say that, if you've never learned German, I say ich, and you're like, how did he make that sound with his face? That's a weird sound, right? It's not a hard sound to make. It's just not one that we make. Any advice on training your brain to focus? Yeah, not great advice. You have to like practice it, and that sucks. For instance, if you're like reading a book and you read a paragraph, you get to the end of the paragraph and you're like, I don't even remember what I was reading. I learned nothing. You have to go back and reread that paragraph. Sometimes you can reread that paragraph like 30 times and still not pick it up. Okay, so there's an issue, right? How do I focus? And there's different things that you can do. Uh, the first thing is if you can make the information relevant to yourself, that'll be the best thing that you can do. If you can just make the information relevant to yourself. If you're trying to improve general focus, then you need to practice focusing on things. The best way to do this is through meditation. And that's why I say I don't really have a good answer for this, or not one that most people like, because most people hear meditation and they're like, ugh, I'm not doing that, right? It's a practice and it's not fun for everybody. Some people love meditation. I really like meditation. I do it all the time. There are some people who are like, meditation does not work for me and it never will. Okay, well, that's the practice. With meditation, especially like mindfulness, right? That mindfulness training, you're like thinking about a specific thing. That's the whole point. I think about my breathing and eventually my thoughts wander. That's not the part that matters. What matters is that I'm good at catching my thoughts wander and then I bring it back to my breath. Or I bring it back to this focal point. I might be like staring at an object, or I might be thinking about a concept, and then my mind wanders. But the important thing is that I bring it back and I pay attention to the concept that I'm thinking about, right? It could be staring at a water bottle, it doesn't matter. The point is that you spend a solid 10 minutes focused in on this thing. And when you practice that, it is a practice, it's not easy because your mind will constantly wander. It's not easy. But if you practice it, you will slowly build up your ability to do it, your tolerance for staying still with your mind. That's how you focus. Yeah. That's my best advice for you, anyway. Do we store any early childhood before age 3 memories, trauma in the hippocampus or elsewhere? I don't think we store much in the hippocampus. I think the hippocampus is a tool that we use to relay, information. Um, and then when it's relayed, it gets stored. So we have a couple of really important brain structures. So we have um, the hippocampus is sort of on the other side over here. It's like down in there, right? It's inside the temporal lobe. It's like down in there. But it's attached kind of where the caudate nucleus is, where I showed you earlier. It's like right back there. It's attached at the back of the caudate nucleus. And then you have your amygdala there for emotional processing. Hey, should I pay attention to this? You have the hippocampus, which is kind of saying, oh, I should relay things. Right here, this like whole area right here is your thalamus. Your thalamus is known as your relay. The reason it's known as your relay is because all of your sensory information, except for your sense of smell, goes through your thalamus first before it gets stored. So all your information gets relayed in the thalamus. The caudate nucleus, the hippocampus, and the amygdala all work together to tell you what about that information is exciting or important to know. And then your hippocampus directs that information where it should be stored. This is how something feels, store it in the parietal. This is how something looks, store it in the occipital, or in the parietal or in the temporal, depending on what aspect of it we're talking about, how it moves or what color it is, right? Or what shape it is, depends. Is it like a face? It goes to the FFA, right? Yeah. The reason smell doesn't work that way is because smell is evolutionarily just a different mechanism to your cortex. Doesn't need any direction. Just goes bam right there. Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of a long explanation for nothing. The cutest neuron you've ever seen. I got him as a graduation present from one of my coworkers who recently got her PhD. Good. I'm glad we're making sense. Hi, Kate Jude. Sorry, I'm like way behind now. Thanks for you guys. Is that how our brains work when we see in real time? I've read that we fill in things even while we're looking at them. True. Yeah. So a couple of things are happening. If you know anything about Baddeley's model of working memory, we have sensory memory, we have our short-term memory, and we have our long-term memory. And so we have our sensory memory is everything that's coming in right here, right now, in the moment. And it's constantly being updated. It literally lasts like maybe less than a second, up to maybe 2 seconds. It's whatever you're paying attention to in the moment. One thing that's happening is you're taking in a ass ton of information. And you have a filter that is purposefully making sure you don't take in everything. Don't remember most of this because it's not necessary. It'll take too much energy. From that, whatever you're focused on will end up in your short-term memory, which is about 18 to 20 seconds. This is basically, okay, we're hanging on to it for 20 seconds. You have 20 seconds to make a decision as to what to do with this information. Are we going to throw it out or are we going to keep it? So in that 20 seconds, here's where working memory comes in. Is while this memory is in your short-term memory, your working memory is pulling old memory from your long-term memory and bringing it into your short-term memory and saying, hey, is this thing that we have from our sensory memory that we're hanging on to because we're paying attention to it related to anything in our long-term? And if it is, how can we apply it here? Or how do we update that old information? And if we can't apply it, we throw it out. We stop paying attention. But if we can apply it, we store it, right? This is our working memory. So something that does happen in real time is that most of our sense, if you're a typical person, comes through your vision and hearing. And but primarily vision. We use vision as our primary sense if your eyes work. And you actually have holes in the back of your eyes where the optic nerve leaves the eye and goes to the optic chiasm, that little cross at the bottom of the brain that I showed you. So that hole in the back of your eye where the optic nerve leaves, that's all dead information. There's nothing there. And you can actually like test for this. There's tons of tests on Google where you can like hold up your finger and use one eye and you like look at a dot just off the side and then the dot disappears. It's because your brain is just putting information there in real time. Your brain is putting its best guess as to what the information could be based on the surrounding information. And we don't just do this with vision. We do this with memory. We do this with we do this with auditory processing. We sometimes do this with touch. Actually, this makes me think of another gentleman who was a patient of Oliver Sacks, who had damage to his parietal lobe, and it messed up the way his sense of touch was communicating. So his hand could tell his brain that it was touching something, but his vibratory sense was not working, so it couldn't tell his brain what he was touching. So every time he went to put his hand down on his keyboard, it would feel like he was touching cotton candy. Anytime he went to touch the wall, it felt like he was touching cotton candy. And it wasn't until he looked down at his hand, because he's like, whoa, is that cotton candy? Right? He looks down at his hand, and whatever he's touching, it turns to that. Because his brain, before the damage, remembers what it was like to touch plastic, remembers what it was like to touch wood, remembers what it was like to touch plaster and to touch drywall, right? It remembers those things, but it doesn't know that's what you're touching right here, right now in the moment. So because it doesn't know, it just goes, my best guess is cotton candy, I guess, right? It's not until he would visually look and have to correct the information, right? So yeah, very much we do stuff in real time. Certain trauma interventions that tap into that TV movie thing. I'll have to talk about it sometime. Yeah, definitely. Is there a crossover in this memory restoration and multiple personality disorder? Like Billy Milligan. I don't know who Billy Milligan is. Oh, I do know who this person is. Oof. Yeah, I my answer is yes and no, which is annoying. I hate when people say that kind of crap, but it's true. The answer is it's not totally crossover in memory restoration. It's more that memory. So someone who is experiencing multiple personality disorder is experiencing life through the lens of another personality than their typical one, and sometimes through many personalities that are different from their typical one. And what this means is that they are storing information differently entirely. So, under this personality or under this subcontext, all this other information looks different. The brain is really good at reusing what it has to store multiple things. And what that means is your generic idea of a dog lives here, but your dog lives here and your neighbor's dog lives here, right? It's just a little bit of a shift in terms of, relatively speaking, where this thing is at. So when you are flipped into a different personality, everything is under a different context. You are remembering everything under a different context. Therefore, that information is stored differently. I hope that kind of makes sense. It's really hard to explain. That's what I believe is happening. To detox from dopamine, I don't know if that's possible. You need dopamine to survive. Uh, I think the only way to like detox from it is to just let your body learn how to produce it naturally. I don't think you should try to not have it, um, like purposefully. I feel like you shouldn't actively try to have it purposefully either. You should just have it when you're supposed to have it. Don't pump yourself full of drugs and maybe get off the electronics once in a while. You know, don't gamble so much. Literally came with memories he never experienced. Yeah, I think he's just the way it's encoded. He's pulling it out under a different context, and so it looks like a different memory. Opposite of the neotics, noetics combos. Super insightful. Okay, good. I'm glad you're getting something. So much education you learned while getting your psych degree. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's good to remember these things. Part of why you do not like reading long books. What, the focusing? Yeah, totally. But I mean, you get better at it over time. It is a good answer because it's the answer, honestly. If you can do it, you should meditate. If you can't, there are other ways to hyper focus. I mean, it's all meditation though. It all comes back to meditation. Even if you're hyper focusing on a video game, you're still technically meditating. You're focused in on it. Do it that way, but you can learn how to do it. Alien contact? Aliens don't wear contacts. Their eyes are too big. What? They have too much sclera. I don't know. Sorry if any aliens are watching my live. I'm not trying to be spacist.
Highly offensive.
I'm sorry. But if you are watching my live, that's dope. Please make contact. facilitate mindfulness groups, and it's challenging because many shrug it and don't want to try. Well, they don't want to try because it doesn't seem like it's working instantly, because it's not. It really is a practice. You have to keep doing it to get good at it, and that's hard to do.
It's hard for people to let go and get in that mindset.
It is hard for people to let go and get in the mindset. My smell was evolutionarily different like that. Makes me think about the smell of grass. Yeah, so if anybody knows about Ebbinghaus, Ebbinghaus has what's called a forgetting curve. And basically, it looks like a straight drop off and then eventually a plateau. So Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve is essentially if you learn a new thing, a new fact. In his case, with his research, he was doing sequences of like 4 or 5 letters, I think, in a row. And he'd give you like 7 or 8 of them. And then he'd immediately test you after. Hey, do you remember seeing these sequences? Or can you repeat to me these sequences of letters and numbers? And if he tests you immediately after, you'll do pretty good. But if he waits 5 minutes, you will drop off severely. And if he waits 10 minutes, you'll almost not remember any of it. But like at some point, a day later, right, you plateau. So you're going to remember some of it. It's just not very much. And it turns out that most semantic knowledge works this way. We learn it, forget almost all of it except for about 10%. And we hang on to that 10% for a very long time. And then slowly, every time we revisit the thing that we're learning, it'll drop off immediately, but the plateau will be higher than it was last time. So every time we relearn something, the plateau raises. We'll remember more each time we're relearning it. That's why you shouldn't take a class and then assume you know everything. You're probably going to forget all of it except for 10%. You should revisit this information. That's why we study. Smell does not work this way. For smell, if we test you immediately, you'll remember about 90%, which is the same as most memory. But if we wait to test you for 7 months, a new odor you've never smelled before, we give it to you that first day, wait 6 or 7 months to test you, you will still remember that odor, that new sequence of odors, 70%, with 70% accuracy, which is way better than 10%. And part of that is likely due to the fact that it reaches the cortex instantly. You have like what's called an anterior olfactory nucleus. Not only that, but there's a really fancy property of the hippocampus where it is one of the only parts of the brain that actually experiences neurogenesis in adulthood. The hippocampus is one of the only parts of the brain that can produce new neurons. The rest of the brain, if your neurons die, they're dead. They're gone. They do not replicate. They will not be repaired or come back. They're gone. But in the hippocampus, new neurons are being formed. And that likely has to do with memory formation, right? It probably has something to do with that. Interestingly enough, the only other brain area that does this that I know of is the olfactory bulb. So when you're taking in smell, the main structure that is the first structure to process that information also goes through neurogenesis. And its structure closely resembles that of the hippocampus. So there's a chance that your odor memory uses its own entire memory circuitry away from the rest of your brain. And then all your other senses all converge on that other one. What's up with the brain, bro? Which brain? My brain? This brain? This brain? It's doing pretty good. Ventral. Dorsal. Posterior. Anterior. Sagittal. I don't know. I'll just say names, say words at you. Big old smarty pants. Okay. Could smell be used to assist the memory improvement? If so, do you have any suggestions? Yes, absolutely. Smell is one of... Okay, so first I'll share an anecdote, then I'll talk about it. Smell is one of the most... And it's not my anecdote either. It's a friend of mine's. But smell is one of the most powerful memory retrieval cues. actually, that's why food is such a powerful memory retrieval cue. If you know this, or if you didn't know this, um, when you eat something, the flavor of that thing is actually smell. It's not taste. You can taste things like sweet, salty, sour, umami, bitter. But when you taste the flavor of an apple, right? So you have an apple, which is sweet, and you have cotton candy, which is sweet. But how do you taste the difference? You don't actually taste the difference. You smell the difference through retrograde olfaction. So retroolfaction is when you put something in your mouth and you chew it, and then the molecules go up into your sinus and into your nose from the back. And it gives this weird phenomenon like you're tasting something, but actually you're smelling it while you're chewing. So although you feel like you're tasting an apple, you're actually smelling an apple while you're eating it. That being the case, that's what makes food a really good memory retrieval cue, or other odors. So oftentimes when you take a test, you want to keep your environment as similar during the test as it was when you were studying. A lot of students use this to their advantage by wearing a certain perfume or cologne when they are studying math, wearing a different perfume or cologne when they make the effort to study science. And some students chew gum, different flavors of gum, um, for that same reason. That wasn't the anecdote. I actually explained it before telling you the anecdote. Here's the anecdote. I have a friend who is a mentor of mine for many years. She is a pretty wonderful lady. She's lived a long life of awesomeness. She was at the store one day and she was getting groceries and she was looking down at her cell phone while she was walking. And she's reading this thing, carrying her grocery bag, and she makes it to the car and looks up to see a really confused old man staring at her. And he's like, "Why are you at my car?" She's not even at her own car. She's at this old man's car. She's like, "That's really weird. Why did I follow this guy all the way to his car?" And she's like, "Oh my God, where's my car?" So she went to go find her car. It turns out that old man was wearing the cologne that her dad used to wear when he was alive many, many, many years ago. And she smelled that cologne. And because she was absentmindedly just paying attention to her phone and walking out to the car, her brain took over and said, "Oh, that's dad. You have to follow dad to the car." Even though by now she's like an old lady, you know, uh, she followed the guy to his car because she was following her dad to the car. Her dad had been dead for like 30 years, right? Or 20 years, something like that. Save toiletries from the hotels from vacations to better remember the vacation. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I can see how that would work. More about how grass screams when it's being cut as a warning. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Plants do a lot of different things, and we definitely take advantage of that. That's how we create a lot of our smells, right? Is taking advantage of that process. There's other, and some memories are actually innate. Some are fear memories. Um, I forget what it's called. It's like, I forget what it's called. Some chemical compound, but it's found in fox urine. And when a mouse is exposed to it, they freak out. It is very scary to them. They do not like it. I think it's called TMS or something, is the abbreviation. I can't remember the big name. But this odor, even if the mouse has never experienced it ever, they're very afraid of it, almost always, because it's a component of fox urine. So not only do we have odor associated memories, we can actually give those odor associated memories to our offspring. Aw, thanks for the roses. Yeah. And there's other examples like that too. But we've been going strong for about 2 hours now. And I'm feeling kind of tired. I need to work on some content. And we're starting to die down too, I think, a little bit. I think everybody's getting a little sleepy. Maybe it's just me projecting. I think I'm going to go ahead and end this live here, unless there's any like final, somebody needs to say something. I'll wait for a second. But if not, then I think I'm going to go ahead and take off. It was really fun. Thanks for all the questions. Everybody's really awesome. Had a really good time. I hope you had a good time. I hope you learned something. Yeah, thanks for the great combo. Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for being here, supporting my content. Please check out my new YouTube channel, Neural Jack. If somebody can type that into the comments one more time, real quick. Check out that channel. There's a video up. It's just a brief history of, behavioral neuroscience. How did we get here? I'm working on a few more videos for that channel. They will be up soon. So, yeah. Also, Jacko All Trades is where I'm live right now. Thanks everybody who joined me here on YouTube. Thanks everybody who joined me on TikTok. I really appreciate you all. Wonderful people. Thanks for keeping my mind fresh, helping me to revisit this information. Thanks for teaching me stuff too. You're bringing up new stuff that I didn't even know existed. I love learning. I'll do it my whole life. Yep. Jacko All Trades and Neural Jack are both on YouTube. Check them out. All right, friends. It's been real. Take care.